Hey everyone, it's me, Edwin, and I made this video to give you a look behind the scenes of the Smokebox Resurrected. Here we go.
Smokebox, Smokebox, come to the Smokebox, 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 that's where the food rots. Yeah!
The core idea for this game came from the Chuck E. Cheese animatronic mascot from the 70s. Or rather, these animatronics in my local supermarket. They are quite something. And they have pigs too. If you press a button, the puppets start playing a song.
Er was eens een schnitzel.
Er was eens een schnitzel.
Die had het niet slecht.
Nee, die had het niet slecht.
Ik kwam in de winkel.
I hope you can understand how this was very inspiring to me. In the story, Smoking Steve wants to keep everything the way it is, including the old song. But Chip and Frankie want to change things around and come up with a new image for the Smokebox. They would slowly convince the other mascots to join them and save the restaurant's future. The gameplay was inspired by Kyle's reluctance to play an auto shooter. I wanted to make a good one of those with a cool twist and interesting boss fights. In games like Vampire Survivors, you shoot in a certain rhythm, and I thought it would be cool to combine that with an actual rhythm game. It would also be a throwback to the rhythm game I made for the Jam in 2022. The initial idea was to make a 10-minute long epic song and you would shoot along with the music. Unfortunately, the actual song making got away from me due to time constraints. I considered asking someone else to make the song, but I never got a good structure that would fit within the game. Boss fights would take longer or shorter depending on what the player does, and so the music would have to dynamically respond to what was happening, and it all turned out a bit too ambitious. I tried several other things too, like active shooting, but it was too hard to grasp and visualize. I left Chip's boombox in there as a hidden unlockable and as a sort of Easter egg of one of the ideas I tried. And of course I left the intro rhythm game in, which I already wrote early on. While it didn't come out the way I originally imagined, it is still an idea that I want to explore later maybe, so don't steal it, please. I got rid of the idea of making a very elaborate song, but I still wanted this game to be a cool audiovisual experience, so instead of music I decided to try and add voice acting to the game. I had my first prototype and script ready about 2 weeks into the Jam, and with the extra week I thought it would be feasible. To avoid having to get a full cast, I made Glary and the Pitmaster silent. And I figured I could do both Frankie and Chip myself with some voice modulation to make them distinct. I put out a request for 4 voices and I got 5 replies. The 5th one was the Prune, who sent in an audition that I really liked. I asked if she wanted to do Chip and she nailed it. She went above and beyond and did extra lines and grunts which ended up in the game, and she crushed the vocals on the song.
Food is lit.
The venues are based and the drinks legit.
That's Smokebox.
That's Smokebox.
The burgers are thick.
Deliveries quick.
Get your
It turned out much better than my original idea to do both voices myself, which would have been weird to have 2 characters with this weird accent. I want to thank Mayor McFrumples and Subterranean Loser for providing voices for Smoking Steve and Jambon, even though they were working hard on their own game at the same time. I really appreciate it. Mayor McFrumples came up with some extra lines as well that ended up in the game because I found them fun, like this one.
And it's a birthday party, so smiles, smiles.
Oh boy, whose birthday?
I also want to thank Ikkity Akkity Oop for their nasty, sinister rendition of Taxi. They added this laugh to the final line, which transitioned perfectly into the end credits, so that was a cool setup.
I expected a great taste.
And last but not least, boat times. did an awesome job with Squandrix's voice and was a pleasure to work with, so thank you all so much.
Oh boy!
As you can see, the prototype 2 weeks in didn't have any art. I used the black and white drawings from Kyle that LKB provided, and some sprites from last year's game as placeholders. I had a 2-week summer break in which I did all the art. While I've gotten better at drawing quickly, I still take a lot of time to get everything to around the same level of detail. In the end, I did cut some parts of cutscenes, including a cool dinosaur death animation which I sketched out but never rendered. I also cut talking animations, except for this one. Probably would have been too much work. Every year I write down the lessons I learned from making the game for my future self and others possibly. I read them before the start of the game jam to avoid falling into the same traps. But to be honest, I failed at least this one. I probably spent more time than other years, but that's probably also because of the extra week we got. This year I have 3 lessons written down, and they have become more specific as this is my 3rd year now, so here we go. Challenge yourself, it's more fun that way. This year I tried my hand at doing physicsy stuff which I had never done before. I really feel like I had learned a lot and opened up a whole new set of possibilities to explore from doing this. I feel like if I just did a repeat of things I already know, I wouldn't have been able to finish this game out of boredom. Second, if it can happen, it will happen. While it was fun to try new stuff, the way the smoke interacted with projectiles, it was more luck than intent sometimes, but it also came with a new set of problems. Turns out, things will break. A thing in Unity is when you add too many hinge joints in a row, like in a cool chain that consists of many tiny parts, there's a small chance one of them can't handle the force that is applied to it, and the whole thing would break. This would happen rarely, but it did happen sometimes. And because a lot of people end up playing these games, I didn't want to leave it up to chance. If it happens once, it will happen again, especially with a large sample size. To fix this particular issue, I applied a bit of structural engineering to solve the problem. At all times, there is a second invisible flying Frankie to divide the weight into 2, instead of just 1 Frankie. But that wasn't enough and it still broke sometimes, so I added these invisible support beams to subdivide it even more. In theory, they could still break, but after adding these, at least it never did on my PC, and I hope it didn't happen on your playthrough. And finally, make every game mechanic overpowered and then tune it down. There are a bunch of weapons in the game, and I wanted all of them to be viable and distinct. The basic starting weapon, the chip, is very straightforward. At first you would only get 1 upgrade for it, the freezing chip. But then I added the flamethrower, and I set the damage pretty low, 5 damage per flame, I guess. But it turned out to be the most overpowered thing in the game, so I set it to 1 damage per flame, as low as it would go. But with that, it still did way more damage than any other weapon, but it was fun. This forced me to make the other weapon stronger, and I added an upgrade to double the chips. Larry's static charge was very weak, then I tuned it until you could basically stand at a boss's feet and melt them down in a matter of seconds. Very fun, very viable, but the ideal turned out to be somewhere in the middle. One mistake I made is that Frankie's pretzels are not limited by frame rates, and so on max frame rate you can still do more damage than on low frame rate. But what I learned from this is that to make something viable you have to make it overpowered and fun to use, give players a reason to use it, and then turn it down if necessary. And that's about all I can fit in here, at least I didn't go long this year, hopefully, and so there should be time for questions. Thank you all for watching.